I'd say there are probably two things that are very intrinsically linked. So, there's the Birmingham community as a whole city, if that makes sense, but then there's also the LGBT community within it. I'd say for the LGBT community, it's access to culturally competent services. What you tend to find is, outside of sexual health, and I think commissioning's been running along the lines of the stereotype that LGBT is all about sex, which clearly excludes gender, which is trans people. And so you have this kind of lopsided service provision which focuses so heavily on sexual health and HIV prevention and misses absolutely everything else that might be affecting the community. So poor mental health, poor physical health, poor sexual health, poor mental health, substance misuse, all those things feed into poor sexual health, but they're not looked at holistically. So you have this lopsided service provision, and you have these very well-funded organisations that look after predominantly gay men's sexual health. The rest of the community isn't looked after at all. And what's happened is a lot of it's just self-organised and self-funded, and it's a poor relation really. And that kind of holistic service offer is what's needed to kind of address some of these serious issues in the community. I'd say concurrent with that, so we live in a very diverse city, also a city with massive poverty, and all of those things will impact on LGBT people that live here as well. So as well as having the lack of those culturally competent services, you've also got all those extra stresses around poverty, poor life chances, poor employment that plague this city. That's not to be negative about the city, but that's a reality of any large city. So there's kind of a whole load of things going on there for LGBT communities in Birmingham. I'd say it's the antidote to what I just said really. In many ways it's that self-organisation and that recognition that where there are gaps in services or they're not funded or provided, people just get together and support each other in all sorts of unstructured and structured ways. So there's lots of peer support, there's kind of a shared understanding of discrimination and how it affects people, and people come together. So the classic example is the 1980s with the AIDS crisis and how the community, faced with this massive challenge and the massive discrimination at the time, self-organised and created groups and charities and organisations, hospices that just weren't provided by the mainstream and certainly weren't provided in a sympathetic and understanding way. And that kind of activism and that social action is carried forward, and you have patchy around the country, but you have organisations providing really interesting support around mental health for LGBT people, for substance misuse, for physical activity, for sports, for arts, for all the creative side of stuff. It's just self-organised, very poorly funded, if funded at all. People just get on and do it because they recognise the need in the community, and that's something that's very, very, that we should all be very proud of, really. I think the proudest thing I'm mixed race, so one of the proudest things in this city for me is that's the highest mixed rate birth rate, which I think is quite an interesting statistic. And Dan lies into statistics, you don't know whether to make of them, but that's something to be very proud of, and it bodes very well to the future, that people live here, sometimes in isolation, but often together, and people fall in love, people marry, people have children, and it just bodes really well for the future. That's something to be proud of in Birmingham. And I think for Birmingham it's about reputation and investment. It's about getting the city to a place where it's kind of self-confident and it doesn't have this kind of constant drag of negativity and this kind of poor reputation it has, which can kind of flip that negative around to make it a really attractive place for investment, for jobs. So some of those stresses are taken away, some of that poverty is taken away, and everyone has equal opportunity here.
Excellent.